China's economic crisis, the dilemma, the truth, and the path ahead, part 3. Okay, circling back after that long detour, we need to talk about something you've definitely heard of. Modern monetary theory, MMT. Don't let the name scare you. It's basically this. A government that controls its own printing press can theoretically never go bankrupt. The real constraint isn't money, it's inflation. As long as prices aren't spiraling out of control, the government can keep printing, keep spending. Does this sound absurd to you? Government just prints money willy-nilly and nothing bad happens? But look at what the US is doing. US federal debt has exceeded 39 trillion USD. Annual interest payments exceed 1 trillion USD. By traditional fiscal theory, this country should have gone bankrupt long ago, but it hasn't. Why? Because the dollar is the global reserve currency. Because the US has sovereign monetary control, because its debts are paid with money, it prints itself. Japan is even more extreme. Japanese government debt exceeds 260% of GDP, highest in the world. Has Japan gone bankrupt? No, because those debts are all in yen. The Bank of Japan can buy them, can print. China actually perfectly satisfies all the prerequisites for modern monetary theory. You have sovereign monetary control. You issue your own currency. Your government debt is mostly denominated in RMB. China's narrow government debt to GDP ratio is about 60-something%. Add in implicit debt from local financing vehicles, and you're just over 100%. Compare that to US federal government at 126.8% or Japan's 260%. Do you think China has room? Massive room. You could even argue China is one of the countries in the world that should be implementing MMT most aggressively. Because your inflation rate is among the lowest of all major economies, CPI fluctuates around 1%. PPI has been negative for years. Your economy is in deflation, prices are falling, your people are pulling back. In this situation, if you're not going to print money, when are you going to? But they just won't go down this road. Why? Not because the theory is wrong, not because the space isn't there. It's ideological resistance. The decision-making level has a bone-deep fear of printing money. This fear has origins. Mention printing money, and people think hyperinflation. Think hyperinflation, and they think of the gold yuan, 1948 currency reform. 1948's gold yuan reform. The nationalist government carried out a currency restructuring, setting exchange rates between the gold yuan and silver dollars. The result? Printed too much. Prices skyrocketed. In the morning, a sack of money could buy a sack of rice. By evening, only half a sack. That scene, a whole generation's memory. This memory is etched into the bones. The two words printing money trigger a visceral reflex back to that imagery. But here's the thing. The gold yuan era and today are completely different. At that time, the nationalist government was fighting a civil war it was destined to lose. Military spending devoured most of fiscal revenue. The government had lost control of the economy. That was war-induced fiscal collapse, not monetary policy failure. Comparing that scenario to present-day China is like comparing someone falling off a cliff to someone twisting their ankle, walking. Both involve falling, but the degree is completely different. Today's China has a complete industrial system, the world's largest trade surplus, a unified market of 1.4 billion people, sovereign monetary control, ample foreign exchange reserves. China's economic scale and strength are not in the same universe as 1948's China. But this fear makes you hesitate even when facing deflation. You're terrified of inflation, so when deflation arrives, you still can't move. It's like someone who was bitten by a snake and later gets scared even seeing a rope, and then when the rope is strangling their neck, they're too afraid to reach out and untangle it. You're afraid of snakes, but the threat you're facing now is a rope. You can't tell the difference anymore. Where does this fear come from? You need to understand a background context. There's an interesting tradition in Chinese policymaking. Each administration pushes back against the previous one. This tradition traces back to ancient factional disputes, but it's especially pronounced in economic policy. When the 2008 global financial crisis hit, China launched the 4 trillion stimulus. Today, the 4 trillion is roundly cursed, blamed for overcapacity, property bubbles, and local debt. Later administrations characterized it as the root of after effects. But think carefully. In 2008, export orders plummeted. 20 million migrant workers returned home. Social tensions were about to explode. The 4 trillion landed. Output was protected. Employment was protected. Society didn't collapse. From the perspective of protecting growth, protecting employment, protecting stability, the medicine hit the mark. Objectively, it did pull the country back from the brink. But later, people didn't see it that way. They treated the side effects as the whole story and glossed over the primary effects. Say it enough times and people start believing it. The 4 trillion was a mistake, became consensus, a political correctness. And with that consensus as the foundation, later administrations walked on eggshells, terrified of being accused of flooding the economy again. 2015. Monetized shantytown renovation, Pongay Hobbyhua. How did it work? The PBOC used the PSL, Pledged Supplemental Lending Tool, to print money. The money went to policy banks, to local governments, for shantytown renovation. Demolished residents got cash and bought homes. Housing prices rose, output was protected, local finances got breathing room, and property inventory was cleared. Was this the right medicine? Yes. The situation then was precisely high property inventory, developers couldn't sell, local governments couldn't sell land, economic growth was falling fast. Monetized renovation injected money precisely into the real estate chain inventory clearing and growth protection, 2 birds with 1 stone. This operation was essentially the PBOC printing money, routing it through policy banks, bypassing the commercial banking system straight to local governments, then channeling it through demolished resident spending into the broader economy. Money reached people. People spent it. The economy started moving. The medicine was right. But 2017, housing is for living, not for speculation. Fanju Bachar. These 4 words came down and the entire real estate industry's expectations instantly reversed. Once the top level set the tone, who would dare speculate? 2018. PSL fell from 1.1 trillion to 470 billion yuan. The medicine's full effect hadn't even kicked in yet, and the brakes were already applied. What do you call that? It's like taking medicine. It hasn't worked yet, so you stop taking it, and then you tell people, see, medicine doesn't work. Then what? After the medicine wore off, the economy stumbled again. 2019, growth continued to decline. Then 2020, COVID arrived. Look at how this cycle turned. 2015, prescribe medicine. 2017, course correct. 2018, hit the brakes. 2020, COVID hit, prescribe medicine again. 2021, 3 red lines, Sando Hongsen slammed down. 2022, property started collapsing, Evergrande blew up, Country Garden issued distress signals. 2023 to 2026, deflation. Each round of braking came earlier and harder than the last. Like a company repeatedly going through project launch, development, launch, crash, post-mortem, full denial, restart. The right things done in one phase got overruled in the post-mortem. Correct features got bashed, cut, overcorrected. Then problems emerged again. Then the right features came back, got bashed again. Round and round. Each rotation makes the technical debt heavier, the refactoring harder. So what exactly are they afraid of? Why won't they go all in? Simply put, 3 things, all non-economic considerations. Not one of them is an economic calculation. First, fear of public backlash. If you heavily stimulate, money flows into real estate, housing prices surge again, young people can afford even less, the housing slave and cutting board narrative explodes. Social media floods with, they're cutting us again and emptying our wallets again. Once this kind of narrative takes hold, it's hard to suppress. And consider, how much more powerful is social media today? In 2015, there was no Douyin, no Xiaohongshu, no Kuaishou. The speed of netizen sentiment then wasn't in the same universe as today. Housing prices go up and every phone in the country gets push notifications of housing prices rising again. That pressure is enormous. That's the public opinion consideration. Second, fear of the deindustrialization, 脱鞋上书 label. Factory owners see real estate speculation as easy money. Stop doing real business and start speculating. This shatters. The real economy is the foundation narrative. How important is that narrative? From the top level down to every ministry, the real economy is the foundation has been repeated countless times. You're shouting manufacturing as the nation on one hand, while allowing funds to flood into real estate bubbles on the other. Aren't you shooting yourself in the foot? That's narrative conflict. Third, fear of a repeat of the 2015 stock market crash. That time, the Gungan bull market imploded. Thousands of stocks hit the daily limit down. Countless people lost everything. Margin traders jumped. Those who financed with borrowed money got forcibly liquidated. Retail investors' money evaporated overnight. If the property market does the same, nationwide negative equity, nationwide mortgage default wave, nationwide civilian hardship, houses and stocks aren't the same, stock falls and you curse a bit, housing falls and you're actually facing foreclosure. A family defaults, the bank seizes the property, what happens to wife and kids? Once you create that scenario nationwide, the consequences are unthinkable. That's the stability consideration. 3 fears, all institutional constraints. Each one alone is understandable, but layer all 3 together. Add in the earlier, banks can't fail, localities can't default, and you find every available tool has been locked away. It's not that they don't want to act, they can't, because whatever they do carries non-economic costs. Not acting has economic costs, acting has institutional costs. And in this decision-making logic, non-economic considerations always rank above economic ones. So they chose the safest path in the end. Do nothing, wait. Wait for what? Wait for a non-existent foothold? Wait for the wind to turn, for dividends, for a new growth engine to fall from the sky. To put it bluntly, your product isn't selling, and you're still stubbornly waiting for someone to invest. Unfortunately, nobody's coming. But flip it around and think, what does a bubble at least indicate? It means consumer confidence is still there. People still believe tomorrow will be better. They're still willing to borrow to buy homes, still willing to leverage up. That means they still have confidence in the future. What does deflation mean? It means consumer confidence has collapsed. People no longer believe tomorrow will be better. They're pulling back, saving money, paying down mortgages early, refusing to date, refusing to have children. Japan's lost decades. The most terrifying thing wasn't that the economy wasn't growing, it's that a generation at their most capable chose to lie flat. They didn't consume, didn't marry, didn't have kids, didn't socialize. The entire society like stagnant water. They feared bubbles, but they should have feared stagnant water more. Slamming the brakes for stability and the deflation that followed the bubble's burst became an even bigger test of stability. This irony is too vast. You refuse to take medicine for fear of a fever, and now the disease has penetrated deep. On the topic of personal choices, let me tell you a real story about a friend of mine. This story doesn't have a direct connection to macroeconomics, but it reflects a mentality very typical of this era. A mindset that looks extremely clear-headed, but is actually extremely dangerous. This friend is in short video content millions of followers. He started with general entertainment content, singing, dancing, comedy skits. Traffic was there, but not huge. Then he found a precise niche and rode the fan economy wave. How powerful is fan economy? A superfan's purchasing power is 5 to 10 times a regular consumer. They'll buy the same products repeatedly, rent out movie theaters, Fengquan Trambor on social media. He caught the wave. Followers grew from tens of thousands to millions. Income multiplied several times over. He made good money in a southwestern new first-tier city, but never bought property, always rented. Bought several SUVs, different brands, totaling around $1 million yuan. Also had several $100,000 in cash. When he talked with me, he was especially smug, felt he had it all figured out. He said, "I'm not shackled by real estate. I'm not a housing slave. I live in the moment. Spend freely." His logic seemed so complete, every sentence correct. Didn't buy a house because he saw through the property bubble. Housing prices will fall eventually. Buying now means being the bag holder. Bought cars for enjoyment. Life is short. Seize the day. Didn't invest because he distrusted financial markets. Stock markets are scams, funds are shogo retail. Each point alone makes sense. Listening to his analysis, you'd think this guy had it all figured out. But I'm telling you, this is mistaking the temporary for the eternal. He made his most vulnerable choices when he felt the best. He thought he saw through everything. He actually saw nothing. Look at his asset structure. Several cars, totaling around 1 million, all consumer goods. Cars, you know how they work. 20% depreciation, the moment you drive off the lot. After 3 years, 50% gone. A car you bought for 500,000 yuan is worth 200,000 in 3 years. 300,000 evaporates faster than most stock market drops. These cars, 3 years later, combined value? At most 400,000 to 500,000, most of it gone. And several hundred thousand in cash? Sounds safe. But have you considered inflation? If massive money printing really comes, your few hundred thousand in cash purchasing power immediately shrinks. He thought he escaped the real estate trap. Actually, he nakedly exposed himself on the front line of inflation. Renting in a new first-tier city, no fixed assets, all his assets are depreciating goods. Once inflation kicks in, rent rises, prices rise, but his money keeps depreciating. He has no hedge. And consider this, how long can his income last? Short video platforms. What's a content creator's lifespan? 3 to 5 years is already the ceiling. Are his followers growing or declining? Content creation competition gets fiercer every day, new bloggers emerging in waves. Will his followers start fatigue in the next year or two? Will his traffic cliff dive? These are swords hanging over his head. His current income is at peak, but he treats peak as normal. He made long-term consumption decisions based on peak income, bought several cars, maintained a high-consumption lifestyle. Once income drops, expenses are rigid. Cars need maintenance, insurance needs paying, gas and electricity bills keep coming, rent needs paying. Income down, expenses won't budge, so he starts eating into savings. Look at history. Every economic cycle bottom has its share of people like this. Before the 2008 US subprime crisis, countless people leveraged up to buy property, convinced prices would only go up. They had their reasons. US housing prices hadn't declined since World War II through 2006. You think they were idiots? At the time, they were the most rational people. Before the 2015 China stock crash, countless people borrowed to buy stocks, convinced the government would bail them out. They had their reasons too. Every previous dip, the government rescued the market. You think they were idiots? At the time, they were making optimal decisions too. Every time was the "this time is different" delusion. Now it's someone else's turn. This group thinks they've seen through the property bubble, thinks not buying a house is being smart, thinks living in the moment is being enlightened. But at the end of the day, economic cycles don't care how enlightened you are. They come regardless, whether you're carrying a mortgage or renting and driving several cars. Every cycle bottom has a batch of enlightened people caught naked. The only difference is the way they were naked. At the end of the day, it's about one word: power. Whoever controls resources has power. You have property, land, resources, you have a voice. You have nothing, you get arranged. You think not buying a house means freedom? Think again. When inflation comes, people with property at least have a real asset. If housing prices rise, they can hedge. You hold nothing, you're passive. You take hits. After every economic crisis, wealth gets redistributed. People with assets who survive the crisis come out richer. People without assets who survive the crisis find their money is worth even less. That's the underlying logic of wealth transfer. You think you're smart, think you've escaped everyone's framework, think you've made a rational choice. But in front of inflation, all rationality is fragile. Because inflation doesn't negotiate with you. It doesn't care whether you bought a house or didn't, whether you're enlightened or clueless. It comes and it comes. And if you have nothing in your hands, you can only passively endure. So the ultimate question, how does all this end? How is deflation broken? Look through all the historical catalysts for inflation in every case. They were forced. Note, forced. Not once did a government judongshaw, "Okay, we've decided to create inflation." Never. Every inflation was forced by circumstances. Path 1. Extreme external shock. Geopolitical conflict, major international upheaval, government spending explodes, printing becomes inevitable, money printed too much, inflation arrives. Then sanctions and supply chain disruptions, imported goods become expensive, imported inflation follows. Much of history's major inflations are tied to these kinds of extreme scenarios. Path 2. Real estate collapses to a critical point, banks can't hold. When bad loans threaten the entire financial system's stability, you have no choice, you print, to rescue the market. If you don't, banks fail, deposits vanish, businesses can't get loans, the entire economic chain breaks. That consequence is far worse than inflation. So you choose the lesser of two evils you print? 2008 America did exactly this. QE1, QE2, QE3, the Fed's balance sheet expanded from 900 billion USD to over 4 trillion USD. Part 3. Exchange rate collapse. Currency plunges sharply, all imports become expensive, imported inflation explodes. The 1997 Asian financial crisis, Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea all followed this script. The baht depreciated overnight by half, import prices soared, price levels doubled multiple times within a month. Look at China's import dependency today. Oil, natural gas, iron ore, soybeans, chips, all dollar-denominated imports. If the RMB depreciates sharply, all these prices immediately transmit to domestic markets. Your gas goes up, your electricity bill goes up, your pork goes up, your phone goes up. Inflation arrives just like that. Look at these three paths. Is there one that's proactive, orderly, and controlled? No. Every inflation catalyst is forced. Every one happens when it's already too late to do it any other way. And too late usually means the situation is already quite dire. Implementing MMT proactively? That's keyhole surgery. You plan it out, control the dosage carefully, move step by step, inflation rises, and you pull back. Being forced into MMT? That's open chest surgery. You wait until the disease has Shenru-Gusei, then you're on the operating table. Whether you'll make it off is an open question. The more you resist inflation, the more brutal the eventual deflation busting will be. This is a law you can't escape. But the last thing I want to tell you, this is what I concluded after researching all this history. Inflation has been accompanying human civilization. Let me repeat, accompanying civilization, not decades, millennia. Look back. Roman Empire silver coins originally were 99% silver. In Nero's era, those silver coins were heavy, bright, nearly pure silver. But generation after generation of emperors, needing to fund armies, welfare, construction projects, and buy loyalty, kept debasing the coins with more and more base metal. Silver content fell from 99% to 50%, then to 10%, then to just 0.5% during the 3rd century crisis. The coin in your hand looked the same size, same weight, but it was practically all copper and lead. The Romans themselves stopped trusting it, but the government forced everyone to use this trash for taxes and transactions. And prices? 1st century AD, 1 pound of wheat cost a few copper coins. By the 3rd century, it had risen hundreds of times. This was the ancient version of quantitative easing, ancient inflation. The Roman Empire wasn't destroyed by barbarians. It was first hollowed out by inflation. The Ming dynasty's paper money, Daming Bolchor, is even more spectacular. First issued during the Hongwu reign, the note read, Great Ming Unrestricted Paper Money, with pictures of houses and trees on it quite elaborate. At first it worked fine, people accepted it. But then, the court discovered a secret. Just printed paper isn't expensive, so they kept printing. No reserve requirements, no redemption mechanism, no issuance cap. By the Xuande reign, the notes were practically worthless. One string of paper money had a face value of 1,000 copper cash, but in the market it was worth only 2 or 3 cash. People simply stopped using it and began privately trading in silver. The government couldn't ban it. You issued paper money for hundreds of years in the end. People chose precious metals anyway. This tells you the lifespan of fiat currency depends on the issuer's discipline. Without discipline, fiat currency is a scam. The US dollar? When the Bretton Woods system collapsed in 1971, it took $35 to buy 1 ounce of gold. Nixon announced the dollar was unlinked from gold. The whole world panicked, but had no choice. America's military and economic power was right there. If you don't trust the dollar, what do you trust? And what happened? 50+ years later, gold is 2,000+ USD per ounce. In over 50 years, the dollar depreciated 98% against gold. If you deposited $35 from 1,971 and took it out today, its purchasing power is less than 2% or 3% of the original. Your grandfather's 100,000 yuan deposited in a fixed account, if taken out today, it might only buy a fraction of what your grandfather could buy with it. That's the nature of fiat currency. It will depreciate. Always. From Rome to the Ming to America, every currency ultimately depreciated. Every single one. No exceptions. Deflation is the exception. Inflation is the default setting. Currency depreciates. Prices rise. This is an iron law. You can temporarily break it, like global central banks did after 2008, with QE temporarily suppressing inflation, like China has temporarily experienced deflation after 2022 due to the property collapse. But temporary breaks don't mean permanent change. After researching extensive historical data, I can say with high confidence, those betting on permanent deflation are swimming against the tide of history. You can say deflation is short-term. You can say prices won't rise for a year or two, but you cannot say deflation is the eternal new normal. That doesn't exist. Currency naturally depreciates, prices naturally rise. This is the destiny sealed the moment human society chose the fiat currency system, because every government has the urge to print money. Because every government faces the choice of print or not, and in an economic downturn, the probability of printing is always greater than not printing. You don't need to believe governments will act rationally. You just need to believe they'll eventually be forced to act. Let me share a very practical observation. China's M2 money supply has already exceeded 350 trillion yuan. M2 to GDP ratio exceeds 240%. A lot of money has already been printed. Why haven't prices risen? Because the money hasn't flowed into consumer markets, it's parked inside the financial system, bouncing between banks, circulating in the bond market, just refusing to head into the real economy. This is called idle capital circulation. But once some node is breached a major exchange rate move, an extreme external shock, real estate actually hits systemic risk. All that parked water will pour out like a flood. Then you'll know what inflation means. The spring is compressed to its limit. It will always rebound. The question is how? Proactively, orderly, like keyhole surgery, or passively, brutally, like open chest surgery. Deflation is temporary. Inflation is eternal. Assets beat cash. Physical beats digital. When everyone is lying flat, you need to stay awake. When everyone thinks this time is different, it's the same every time. When winter passes, only those dressed warmly will walk out. Those who pawned their clothes during the coldest days can only huddle in corners when the sun comes out. One last thing that might make you uncomfortable. Everyone in this predicament is a victim, but everyone has also, in some way, made their own choices. The decision makers chose caution, chose to wait. Enterprises chose not to invest, chose to contract. Ordinary people chose not to consume, chose to pay down mortgages early, chose to lie flat. Everyone thought they were making the most rational choice. But all rational individual choices combined produced an irrational collective outcome. This is the cruelest paradox in economics, the fallacy of composition. Everyone does what's best for themselves, but the result of everyone doing what's best for themselves is worst for everyone. Breaking this paradox requires someone to take the first step. Someone needs to believe first, spend first, invest first, take risks first. But that first is the hardest part. Because the first mover bears the greatest risk, while the late movers get to enjoy the path the first mover blazed. So everyone waits for someone else to move first, and everyone stands still. This is the predicament. This is the real situation of China's economy right now. Have you noticed? More and more people around you are discussing emigrating. Not that they've actually left, they're discussing it. Before, people talked about changing jobs and changing cities. Now they talk about changing environment. Not always for any specific reason, often just because they feel they can't. Gen hustle anymore. A friend told me, he's not doing this to make more money, it's so his child can grow up in a more predictable environment. Listen to that, a person in their 30s has lived this long, and their biggest demand isn't to earn more money, it's predictability. What does that tell you? It tells you that expectations management for the future has completely broken down. When individual expectations for the system are universally downgraded, no amount of water printing helps because confidence is something the central bank can't print. And more people are starting to discuss gold. Not in an investment sense, in a life sense. Your mum suddenly calls and says, "Go buy some gold." Your colleague is researching where to buy gold bars. Someone on your social media shows off their gold beans. When a society collectively rushes toward gold, Fundamentally, it's a sign that confidence in the domestic currency is shaking. It doesn't mean collapse tomorrow, but it signals an unease spreading. This unease doesn't come from any specific event, it comes from an overall atmosphere. You can't say exactly what you're afraid of, you just feel unsettled. So look, from macroeconomic data to micro-level experience, from policy choices to individual behavior, from historical patterns to real-world predicaments, all the threads point to the same conclusion. This economy is experiencing a deep structural crisis. Not a problem with one sector, not a problem with one cycle. It's the entire growth model, the entire distribution system, and the entire social expectation failing simultaneously. And this kind of multi-layered overlapping problem can't be solved by any single policy tool. It requires systemic adjustment. And that systemic adjustment is precisely what's most absent. I know many people will feel uncomfortable reading this. They'll think I'm peddling anxiety, think I'm singing doom. But think carefully. Every sentence I wrote, which one is fabricated? Retail sales turning negative, that's National Bureau of Statistics data. Auto retail falling 16.1%, that's official data. Fixed asset investment down 4.1%, that's official data. Personal mortgage recording its first annual decline, that's PBOC data. Bank net profit falling. Credit card NPL rates soaring, that's Financial Supervisory Administration data. Household disposable income at only 43.5% of GDP. That's National Bureau of Statistics data. These aren't things I made up. These are the reality this economy is experiencing. I just connected them, told a complete story. This story isn't pretty. But real stories usually aren't. What's a pretty story? The economy is stabilizing and improving. Consumption recovery shows good momentum. New quality productive forces are flourishing. But do these match your own experience? Open your wallet and look. Look at people around you. Look at whether the restaurant you frequent has closed. Look at whether your downstairs mall has more empty shops. Look at whether the real estate agency at your compound entrance has been replaced by a mahjong room. Then you'll know what the real story is. I don't offer answers because this problem is too big for anyone to give a simple answer. I only offer perspective. When you used to see negative retail sales, you thought, another bad number. After reading this article, you should think, this isn't a number, it's a signal telling us the economy's circulation mechanism has broken. When you used to see the central bank tightening, you thought, normal liquidity management. After this, you should think, when the economy is this bad and they're still tightening, it means the decision-makers' fear of inflation has surpassed their fear of deflation. When you used to see mortgage declines, you thought people are deleveraging good. After this, you should think people aren't proactively deleveraging. They've stopped being able to borrow, which means the entire society's capacity for credit expansion is collapsing. Perspective is more important than answers, because with the right perspective, you can find your own answers. If your perspective is wrong, even if someone hands you the answer, you can't understand it. That's the purpose of this article. Not to tell you the world is ending, but to tell you how the world is currently operating. Once you understand how it operates, you can make better preparations. Tonight, as I type all this out, the city outside the window glows with lights. Look at those skyscrapers, those office buildings, those malls, those apartments. Behind every window is a family, each with their own story, their own difficulties and hopes. They may not know what tomorrow brings, may not know when the economy will improve, may not know if they can keep up with their mortgage payments, but they're persisting. That's enough. In an era of deep uncertainty, persistence itself is a kind of courage. But courage alone isn't enough. You also need to see the direction clearly. See what this economy is going through. See what policymakers are thinking. See what historical patterns are pointing toward. See your own situation and choices. You don't need to become an economist, but you need to at least know what kind of ground you're standing on, because only by knowing the changes can you make the right responses. Someone might say, you're just a WeChat public account writer. What qualifies you to analyze macro issues? What do you know? My answer, I don't need to understand every detail. I just need to read through the public data, think through the basic logic, and honestly say what I see. I'm no worse than any economist. They understand models. I understand people. They understand formulas. I understand common sense. They tell you, according to our model, GDP growth will reach approximately 5%. I just tell you, the noodle shop downstairs closed. The company next door laid people off. Housing prices in your hometown fell by a third. Which is more real? You decide. I'm just an ordinary person, using ordinary eyes to look at an extraordinary world. I don't produce truth, I produce thinking. Thinking itself has value, because in this era of information overload, what we lack most isn't information, it's independent, honest, courageous thinking that's willing to face reality, not dodge the truth, and stays clear-eyed throughout. Spring will surely come, but do you have your clothes ready?